光月おでんは男だろ。だから僕は男になった。
It's a man.
What would you call someone who identifies as a man, uses male pronouns, consistently expresses their desire to embody the spirit of a man and his actions, and calls himself a son?
It's a man.
What would you call someone whose father, even though he's a literal monster, calls him son?
It's a man.
What would you call someone who consistently insists that they are a man, and that they became a man, and that they see themselves in a male role model so much that they spent their whole life trying to become more like that one man?
It's a man.
In any case, in real life, you would call that person a man. And indeed, the person I am talking about here is a transgender man. Specifically, a character in the hit manga and anime series One Piece. And his name is Yamato. If you Google it, you will regret it.
No! Not into the pit! It burns!
Because if you call Yamato a man, as is stated outright multiple times in the manga and the anime, including in scenes where he uses the men's onsen, explicitly rejecting a female gender role, completes his character arc and is given the chance to fully realise who he is without his father, who he explicitly models himself in opposition of, becoming his arch enemy in an act of defiance, and remains a man, and consistently uses male pronouns for himself, and calls himself a man and a son, well, if you do that, half of the fandom will try and rip you to absolute shreds. Don't mess with One Piece fans. We haven't even read our own manga.
女になった。
どう？本当の自分に目覚めた感想は？
これが私。ありがとうございます、今様。私、本当の自分に気づけました。男なのか？心は女です。
For those unfamiliar, here's a quick recap. One Piece is an extremely long-running manga series by Eiichiro Oda that follows the adventures of a pirate with stretchy powers and a heart of gold, Monkey D. Luffy, as he crosses the seas to find the treasure known as the One Piece, punch gods and kings in the face, and bring liberation to the peoples of the world. Or, if you're the kind of fans mad about Yamato, it's actually about which of the two of Luffy's right-hand men is the strongest and the most manly, and about how long it's going to be until they make out sloppy style. Getting back to the character in the series I'm interested in talking about here, I'm half convinced there is a large faction of online One Piece fans who just haven't read or watched One Piece. Yamato's transness is pretty clear, and the transness as a theme in the series is all over the place. The arc he appears in also introduces Okiku, a contrasting figure, as explicit trans woman representation as you can get. When she is referred to as the most beautiful swordsman, she explains to our series regulars that she is a woman at heart. Sanji, the story's most closeted womanizer, is obsessed with her, as he is with every woman, and she, in contrast to Yamato, at the end of their arc, insists on bathing in the women's onsen. Many fans also deny that Kiko is trans, but to a much lesser extent, presumably because she looks feminine, and Yamato, well, Oda didn't help himself by drawing him with gigantic boobs, and insisting on including him in a bunch of spreads with female characters, but then again, Tony Chopper is in those too, and no one's insisting he's a girl.
Let's go, girls.
The thing is, many of the reasons people use to deny Yamato being trans give away to me that they just don't know many trans people. People will grab onto anything to deny a trans character, and trans people in real life for that matter. And some of the excuses they make for why Yamato absolutely could not possibly be trans at all are just descriptors of trans people. For example, he ain't trans, he just identifies as a man! Or attacking Yamato's trans voice actor for saying she identifies with him as a trans person and making outrage content about it, like Crunchyroll's One Piece dub defies Oda's wishes and rewrites Yamato's gender. And One Piece English voice actor Michelle Rojas called out by fans after attempting to push debunked transgender Yamato theory. These resulted in some very cool and normal replies. I won't show them here, but some of you people need therapy. And my absolute favourite, trash YouTube videos with titles like "Woke weirdos claim Yamato from One Piece is a transgender man, despite all evidence to the contrary." Or, as the description reads, The woke activists are going after anime again! This time claiming that a character from the hit anime is a transgender man. Despite all evidence to the contrary, they're claiming anyone who doesn't side with them are homophobes. When are these weirdos ever gonna stop embarrassing themselves?
I haven't even begun to peak. And when I do peak, you'll know.
I have to assume, if you're writing this, you have never read or watched One Piece. Because this is the story that brought you genderqueer drag queen Bon Clay of such great quotes as "Queers never die," and their magnum opus, "One may stray from the path of a man, one may stray from the path of a woman, but there is no straying from the path of a human."
I'm gonna peak so hard that everybody in Philadelphia is gonna feel it.
Or one of the most important characters in the show, and a commander of the literal Revolutionary Army where Monkey D. Luffy's dad is the head of, Sanji's mentor, and another friend of the crew, Emporio Ivankov, a literal gender-shifting Rocky Horror reference, who literally has the power to trans people's darn gender, and does so multiple times on screen, often to the delight of those who receive their gift. Half of the arcs in the show are about how racism and slavery are bad and should be destroyed by any means necessary. This is the wokest anime on the goddamn planet. If you can't see that, I genuinely think you might need to go back to school. In fact, there's a good chance if you think this, you are still in school.
We're here and we're queer!
They're all queer like me.
It reminds me a lot of this post that made the rounds a while back. In 2019, we're going to have an anime character turn to face the audience, look the viewer dead in the eye, and say in perfect English, "I am transgender." And we'll still have otaku fuckboys trying to insist there's an intricate Japanese historical context for why they aren't. Anime! Although this was tested to its absolute limit by Bridget from the Guilty Gear series, turning to the camera in the video game and saying, "I am transgender," and people still deny that she's a girl to this day, despite, well, her saying, textually, "I'm a girl," like, in the game.
Don't mention it. Happy trails, cowgirl, or, cowboy.
Cowgirl is fine, because I'm a girl.
Some people just refuse to acknowledge trans people wherever we are. And a lot of this does feel like real life. It's the same rhetoric, the same people, all the same words. Like, it's almost as if we're an existential threat to their worldview, to which I have to ask, if we are, well, why? If your entire perception of existence is shattered by the existence of a single trans person, of someone crossing the boundaries of what you understand as gender, then you're really not sure of yourself at all, are you? Are you okay?
Be more constructive with your feedback. Wow.
The thing is, if you're spending so much time on the internet furious that people think Yamato is transgender, well, you're probably a little bit transphobic. Let's be honest. Otherwise, why on earth would you give a single shit? I care about the issue because I hate seeing people look at trans characters and insist they are not trans, and I, relate to the character. But this denial of trans characters is an ongoing issue in anime for years at this point, from Steins Gate to Zombieland Saga, and in other media like in Guilty Gear. This is an ongoing issue, and as a trans person, I care about it. But if Oda came out and had Yamato stare at the reader and say, "I am not a transgender man, I was just a big fan of Kozuki Oden, I love the women's onsen," then I will relent. But there is no such evidence the other way around besides the odd piece of barely canon paraphernalia, or early concept drawings. And if we go by them, well then, Robin doesn't exist, and Chopper is a 7-foot-tall lanky thing, straight out of Five Nights at Freddy's. Look, it's canon! Nami has one leg and an axe! Oda drew this in an early draft, so this is canon forever! Sanji has a gun! Come on, if you're not trans, why do you care so much about a character, a side character at that, being thought of by large swathes of the fandom as transgender? If this pisses you off so much, you'd hate my opinions on Sanji. And this is after the onsen scene? The scene where Nami invites Yamato to the women's bath. He straight up says, "Sorry Nami, there are no mixed baths." Kiku comes instead, and Yamato joins in the men's baths, with a giant sign saying, "Men's baths." and how Luffy refers to Yamato as Yama-o or Yamagai, the same way he refers to Law and Kid, two other male pirate captains, and how Yamato uses Boku, the male pronoun, how in flashbacks Yamato is referred to as a girl and she pronouns, but in the present he is called son, even by Kaido, and everyone uses male pronouns for him. I mean, come on.
It's a man.
If you're not trans and this triggers you, if the idea of a trans character existing triggers you, I think you might need to go to therapy and find out why exactly that is. This should not affect you whatsoever. They call us on the left snowflakes, but the moment a drawing looks sexy and then turns around and says it's a man, you start hurting yourself in your confusion like a fucking Pokemon. Let it go, man. There are real problems in the world. If you want to protect your little cisgender fifi so much, go back to Sword Art Online.
It just seems not gay, wrong, not gay.
I, and many other trans people, see ourselves in Yamato. The voice actor for Yamato in the English dub, also a trans woman, said the same thing, to which I saw the simplest answer to why every cis-het otaku is watching this and freaking out. How are you a One Piece fan but transphobic? Y'all are just mad that you're attracted to a trans man. Y'all are losing your goddamn mind over the fact that if you accept that he's trans, that means you're gay. Like you can be attracted to a femme-presenting trans without being gay. Truly, internalized homophobia has a lot to answer for.
It just seems not gay, wrong, not gay.
And if you got through Impel Down without dealing with that part of yourself, I insist you rewatch it. You guys don't need Jesus. You need Ivankov. I started watching One Piece after putting it off for literally 20 years, and watching Fullmetal Alchemist, Naruto, and Bleach instead mostly. And I started watching it because of Kiku. But by the end of Wano, I really saw myself in Yamato also. A lot about him screams trans, and not just the, you know, going by male pronouns and calling himself a man and a son thing, but his entire arc is heavily transcoded, so let me explain why, and why I think Yamato's story in Wano is an incredible piece of transgender storytelling. And if you deny this facet of the character, you're missing out on just a great piece of art. And for what? So you can keep voting for Donald Trump while insisting your favourite anime is the one with the gender-fluid drag queen with the power to trans your damn gender? I think someone might have some questioning to do, such as, why do you care so much? And does it give you feelings?
Wrong, not gay.
One of the main reasons cited for why Yamato is absolutely not a trans man by fans of the series that wish to stay in denial about the character is the way Yamato talks about his gender. In his own words, Kozuki Oden was a man, so I became a man. Kozuki Oden was Yamato's hero, and one of the most important figures in the Wano arc of One Piece, a man who casts a shadow over the entirety of that story. It was Oden's death that preceded Yamato's father and the pirate emperor Kaido gaining full control over Wano through his puppet. And through defeating Yamato's father, our heroes plan to return Wano to his son, long-running perverted child gag who has to learn the meaning of leadership and sacrifice to rise to match the legend of his father, Momonosuke. Yamato introduces himself as Kozuki Oden, dresses like Kozuki Oden, and insists that his life will mirror Oden's, including going to sea, with Luffy presumably, as Oden did with the previous pirate king Goldie Roger. And Yamato seems to be in fact already mirroring Oden's journey in the manga to an extent, with his journey around Wano. But I mentioned how Kozuki Oden casts a shadow over the Wano arc, and for a moment, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to paraphrase a dead white man. I'd like to talk a bit about shadows and masks. Apologies in advance for all the psychoanalysis heads. In Jungian psychoanalysis, the shadow refers to the aspects of one's personality that we choose to reject and repress. To simplify the long and complex work of one of the most influential psychoanalysts of all time, and probably butcher it, let's be honest, rather than rejecting the parts of ourselves that are associated with shame, disgust, and darkness, to actually move forwards towards self-actualization, we must acknowledge our shadow and accept that it is a part of who we are to move forward. For Yamato, part of his character he hides away, his shadow, is his reality as Kaido's son, and its implications. Despite emulating and even becoming in his mind Kozuki Oden, he is Kaido's son. He will inherit what Kaido has built through his reign of terror, and to accept that he is Yamato, he is Kaido's son, despite all Kaido has done to him, is really hard. Confronting that part of you that brings you shame, that scares you, that is hard. Yamato knows this part of himself well, but tends to avoid confronting it head on, at least until the arrival of Luffy and the Straw Hats, and he does this by putting on a mask, or in Jungian terms, a persona. Yes, this is true. I am making a reference here. I am a nerd. I don't care. I keep thinking about it, and so now you have to hear about it too. Kozuki Oden is Yamato's persona. Just like in the video games, it's true. Hear me out. Don't run away just yet. A persona is a compromise between the individual and society. It's heavily influenced by the world around you, and it is how you present yourself to other people. It, of course, does not represent the totality of who you are, but it is important in how you wish others to view you and how you are viewed by others in actuality. In the words of Carl Jung, the persona is a complicated system of relations between the individual consciousness and society. Fittingly enough, a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression on others, and on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. While Yamato knows he is not literally Kozuki Oden, he uses the ideal and memory of Kozuki Oden as his persona. By presenting himself as Oden, he makes a statement about how he wants to be seen, and how he intends to act. Is this healthy? Maybe not, but it is a statement of intent and a deliberate choice. Yamato has seen his shadow, the son of Kaido, scared and alone, tortured by his own father, but even after all that, fated to replace him and expected to follow in his monstrous footsteps. But instead of trying to become a version of himself that knows the shadow and moves forward to become a version of himself that knows his darker side and uses that to become a better person, he remains scared, terrified of becoming his father, as he is fated to be and ordered to be. So, he hides behind the persona of Kozuki Oden, something which, in the long term, is unsustainable. Eventually, to become a fully realized human being, one must resolve this inner conflict. The persona and the person beneath the mask must resolve themselves. Kozuki Oden must be laid to rest, and Yamato, the person, must be born. By the end of Wano, I would argue this has happened. He is Yamato, and after all this, he is still a man. Because becoming Kozuki Oden is not just about copying a cool guy Yamato wants to model himself after. It's a statement of purpose. Yamato saw who he wanted to be, and the only way he could communicate it was to say that he would become Kozuki Oden himself, not his father, who was his main male role model, who he was destined to emulate, and a terrible example of what a man is supposed to be. Instead, he declares himself, in the only way he knows how, to be everything his father is not: empathetic, heroic, a shining example of positive masculinity, and a mortal enemy of his father to boot. Someone who will take him down and fight against him to the bitter end. Sometimes we need to see something, or someone, to truly realize who we are. And to demonstrate this, let me talk a bit about my transition, and how I realized I wanted to become the woman that I am, thanks to the people that showed me the way.
Trans people are less than 1% of the population, right? And I don't know about you, but it seems like we're in the headlines every single day, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that we're responsible for all of the world's ills.
The moment I knew I was trans, despite years of waking up and crying because I hadn't magically become a woman overnight, which, should have been a sign, on top of a whole bunch of other stuff, was when I was on a trip in Leeds with my ex, and I was browsing Reddit. Like a normal cis person, I was browsing the trans timeline subreddit, and I happened across a timeline of a trans person who looked exactly like me. And I mean the spitting image of me, in the first picture. As I flipped through the pictures on the post, I watched as this person, me, became a beautiful woman. In that moment, I knew that the thing I'd assumed I'd never be able to do was actually possible. Now, I know that that person was a different person to me, but looking at that post, as I did over and over again for months, I knew that was who I wanted to be. I saw myself in that journey. As far as I was concerned, that was me, and that was my future, if I chose to take that path. And I chose. It's a lot easier to work out who you are when you can look right at it, when you can point at it and say, yes, that's me, that's it. And in the land of Wano, a place closed off to the rest of the world, where your main role model is your psycho dragon demon dad, well, how are you going to know who you want to be until it's staring right at you? Yamato did not want to be just any man. He certainly didn't want to be his father. But he wanted to be Kozuki Oden. Yes, a man, but a good man. The kind of man that would bring an end to his father's reign of terror and bring peace and prosperity to the people.
光月おでんは男だろ？だから僕は男になった。
In the years since I saw that transition timeline, I clung to hope in the form of other trans women too, particularly the writer Paris Lees. She was a trans woman, she was gorgeous, she was from Nottingham, and sometimes that's all you need. She could do it. A woman from my hometown. Not only a trans woman, but outspoken and a writer, just what I wanted to be. She'd gone through some real shit, and she not only made it out, but she became a star, at least in my eyes. If I had been in an isolated place, with no references outside of my immediate community, and I had encountered Paris Lees, the image and the story like Yamato did, I would almost definitely be saying, I want to be her. I doubt any of you watching haven't had a similar moment, whether you are trans or not, when you see someone who embodies everything you wish you could be, and it helps you realize your goals. Sometimes goals you didn't even know you had. Helps you realize the person you want to be, who you could become, and that such a thing is indeed possible, that your dreams can come true. There's proof. Because you can see that it can, embodied in an example, a person right in front of you. And that's important to this story especially, because dreams are one of the biggest through lines in One Piece, one of its most consistent themes. Every pirate in Luffy's crew has a dream, almost always difficult, some might say even impossible. But One Piece maintains that these dreams, even the impossible ones, can come true, with the willpower and the nakama to get you there. Yamato can become the man he wants to be, and he manages it without having even met Emporio Ivankov. Once he gets hit with that hormone fruit, if he chooses to take it, forget about it. Yamato dreamed of becoming Kozuki Oden, and his journey has just begun. He already helped overthrow his father and restore Wano to Oden's family. He's a respected guardian of the land, and has already made a start on travelling too, with hints he'll even go further and that he will set sail. And this is a story with a magical gender-fluid drag queen that can change your gender with magic, and a virus that changes your gender too. Being trans is far from being unheard of in this story, it's basically half the things that happen. And in fact, I would argue that Yamato's insistence that he is Kozuki Oden is a statement of purpose, not that he's just a woman playing dress-up, or whatever bollocks the fans in denial are saying. His male role models have shaped how he describes himself. He is not simply a man because he is not Kaido. He is Kozuki Oden, the hero. He is a good man. This dream is coming true. This is the essence of One Piece. To deny the dreams of these characters is to reject the very thesis of the manga. To deny Yamato can become the man he dreams of being is to deny that Luffy will become king of the pirates. Becoming Kozuki Oden is an explicit rejection of Kaido, and the kind of man Kaido embodies. This does not mean Yamato is not trans, just as it doesn't mean Kiku is not trans because she's a woman at heart. This also means she is trans. These are different ways of describing the same idea, not some sort of puzzle for you to solve so that you can catch a case of the not gays.
It just seems not gay, wrong, not gay.
Compared to Yamato, I suppose, it's hard to deny the transness of Ivankov and Bonchan because they are outward and flamboyant, stereotypes even. But for the many people who want to deny these stories, any story with a trans person in it that might not look like what they expect, that is a hero without the humour attached, the idea of trans people outside of drag or parody, well, accepting that would mean accepting that we're not just actors or the butts of jokes or performers. We're multifaceted, diverse members of society that deserve advocacy and a place in the world, that deserve a world run not by Kaidos, but by empathetic people who would sacrifice their very lives for the good of others. People like Kozuki Oden, people like Yamato. To borrow from the work of Jude Doyle for a minute, talking about the complexities of the way a very small number of trans men can turn on trans women, and rejecting that to build for himself a positive image of masculinity as a trans man, the guys who do this pretty clearly believe that admitting to having power, let alone a specific form of power they get from being masculine or a man, means seeing their worst nightmare in the mirror, erasing their own very real history of misogynistic oppression, becoming identical to the men who've harmed them. They believe it means admitting that all men are monsters. The good news is that it doesn't mean that. I am a man. I am not a monster. I am not a man like you, because you think all men have to be monsters. This is the core of why Yamato thinks of himself as Odin. He is a man, but the man he's grown up with, demonstrating what masculinity is to him, is Kaido, a monster. Yamato is a man, but he is not Kaido. And the first good man he sees, the manifestation of positive masculinity that gives him the realization of who he truly is Kozuki Odin. To become Odin is to become that man, something he could not express with Kaido as his father figure, and with being the heir to Kaido as his destiny. The final element at play here, I believe, is simply the erasure of trans men. When people think of trans people, they think of trans women, because trans women are the image the media wants you to think about and to fear. The existence of trans men complicates their narrative, so they either pretend trans men don't exist, or they act like they're confused women simply led astray by these predatory trans women who are actually just perverts in disguise, trying to destroy healthy breast tissue by any means necessary. Yamato, like many trans men on the screen, often just breaks people's brains. They are not prepared to deal with a trans man existing, particularly one who still has breasts. If you isolate yourself from hearing experiences from the queer community, you might not have any frame of reference for what Yamato is, and so you make excuses. You choose not to see it. In the words again of Jude Doyle, this is a red six of spades problem. The dominant culture's seeming unwillingness or inability to grapple with the particulars of the transmasculine experience is partly a bigotry problem, but it may also be a red six of spades problem. If something falls too far outside your established framework, you can't see what you're seeing. Trans people, at least in the United States, live within a Western, Christian, patriarchal gender binary that is pretty much engineered to make sure we don't exist. Understanding us in the terms of that system is impossible. So you cannot see what is directly in front of you. Or you choose to deny it because the implications might say something about you or how you see the world that you feel particularly uncomfortable facing. Parts of your shadow, perhaps. Or you really, really want those useless-ass Survivor cards to be the final say on what is canon and what is not. Well, the story isn't over yet. For all I know, you could be proven right. I highly doubt it, because if you are, it means Oda wrote this character really badly, because Yamato reads trans as fuck from beginning to end. And just because you don't understand that doesn't mean that it's not true. Forgive me if I don't take random internet commenters who aren't trans as the final word on whether a character is trans or not. I think trans people know a fair bit more about whether a character reads as trans or not, and since that onsen scene made it solidly bloody canon, no matter what side illustrations are done in the meantime, until we get explicit proof otherwise, Yamato is a trans man. And you guys need to work out why that bothers you so much. Because it really shouldn't. And if this made you angry, well, stay mad. Until you work that out with your therapist, I'll be here, and I'll be ready to talk. Until then, thank you for watching. Bon voyage. Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you liked it, give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe, tell all your friends, share it around, give me all of your money because I'm in horrible debt. You can do that on Coffee or PayPal, links below as always, or sign up to my Patreon or YouTube memberships. We get early videos, access to members in the Discord, my Nintendo friend code, and interviews with YouTubers that I've interviewed in the past. You get the whole thing, the whole thing, not just the bit that was in the video. And you can get your name read out at the end of each video, just like these lovely people. Lee Wilkins, George Geddes, Kira Benos, fucking Hutton, Corey, Matt J, 19th and the Sword, Carolyn, Imogen, Hugh, Ciano, Frandia, Thunder, Adam, Harry and Dog 191, Cav, Quesadilla, Totoria, Azul, Leron, Adam Lees, Danielle Nevels, no, not that, Paul, MB, Madeleine Aguirre, Ben Murphy, Lex Phoenix, Ed DeCruzitz, Mira D, Jade Senior, Boa, JW, Adolf, and Gil Bob, the Builder, 5045554, Deborah Laboon, Vegas, Silas Athenium, Vince Whitaker, let me start that one again, Amelia Lissette, Jason Haig, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena Real, Sierra Whiskey, Orestria, Ali Cat, Killjohn, and Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, The Shield, Theta, Robin Podolsky, Turtle Chun, Casual Observer, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Philippa Tibroga, Silver Piglet, Brain, Douche, Artie Wolf, Greg Noble, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexander Lily, Howard Lots, and Eridia Start, and Joe Bolt. Alright. Enjoy the high seas. Anime!